Hi everybody. In this video I'll be talking about REST web services. And other times you'll hear it as RESTful apps. And REST stands for Representational State Transfer. And like MVC, the video we've just been watching, hopefully, REST is just an architectural pattern or a design pattern. It's just a way of implementing or a way of thinking about our application. And there's some guiding architectural constraints. So let me just put constraints here and talk about them. One is that it's a client-server architecture. And we've already talked about this with MVC, so I don't really need to go too much into it. But what we're doing is we're separating the user interface concerns from the data storage concerns. And this allows us to evolve these different components of our application separately. So you're thinking, wow, this sounds like a lot like MVC. Pretty similar. They're sharing a lot of different designs, but they're just slightly different kind of views or of this kind of a similar thing. So client server is one of the constraints that we're viewing it as we're separating constraints of the interface, user interface, from how things are represented, how data is represented. So this can be both a web server, like what we'll be working on in this class, or even any application really. We're just trying to separate how things are viewed versus how the data is stored. The other aspect is that it's stateless. So each interaction we have with the client, with the browser, we're on the server side, we don't know that they're coming from the same browser. So we don't store any client context on the server side between requests. So that's what stateless means. Now, one big one is representation. So in order to do this, both the client and the server need to have one single representation that they can deal with. So if the server outputs a particular type of representation, the client needs to know how to interpret that. So let me just give an example. Suppose we're worried about or we're interested in keeping track of musical tracks. So different songs. And I might have like an artist that's Dua Lipa. The title of the track is Scared to Be Lonely. And the duration is, let's say, 3 minutes, 50 seconds. So I have that type of information. I have a bunch of these. They're all musical tracks. And I would like to represent them and be able to send information back and forth between a client and server. Now, there's several popular representations for doing this. One is called XML, and let me just give you that. So I might have something called a track here, and in that track I might have an artist, and that's Dua Lipa. And I might have a title, and that's, whoops. And I might have a duration, and that might have within it minutes of 3, and let's say second. This is my So it might look like that in XML. Oops, and I didn't close my tag. Another way, let me just get rid of this so I can do it a different way. Another way, and one which is more popular nowadays, is called JSON for JavaScript object, notation. And that looks like this, and you'll probably be pretty familiar with this type of representation. So we have an artist here. This may look like a Python dictionary to you. Title. And I'll have a complex structure here. Minutes 3. Sorry, I'm suck at this. Now I've probably made a bunch of errors, but that's basically what a JSON object notation looks like. I'm hope this is sort of, if you're thinking of kind of dictionaries, this is the key, and this is the value for that key. So the artist is Dua Lipa, sorry, title, Scared to be Lonely, and so forth. So we have to agree on some notation, some representation, and JSON is by far the most common, and it's the one we'll be using in this class. Another thing that we're concerned about when we're implementing this is that we need to have some communication going back and forth, and we are interested in this aspect of messages. We're going to be passing information back and forth between the client and server using messages. And from the client, these messages are called requests, and they have the following properties. They have some verb, they have some URI, some web address that the request is going to, and they have something called a request header. So let's give that a shot. So here I am, I'm going to websniffer.net. Let me just type in this CAPTCHA here. Okay, and let's just go to zaharsky.org, my website. And let's say I'm doing a get, that looks good. Okay, let's submit this. So here we have, here's that request header I mentioned. It has a verb, and that verb in this case is get. It has this other information. It has the URI was somewhere here. I'm not seeing it currently. Oh, right over here. And that's the request. And then the server responds with a response. So these messages consist of requests and responses, and that's how it looks, this basic information. These verbs can consist of a number of options here. And for that, let me talk very briefly about something called CRUD, which is not REST, and it's not MVC. It's something slightly different, but it's interrelated. And CRUD is an acronym, and it's related to when we're developing data apps that involve manipulating data. And CRUD stands for create, read, update. So these are the things we want to do with our data. So we might want to create something in our database, a musical track. We might want to read it, so we're querying, give me all the tracks that so-and-so has. We want to update, make a change to it. It wasn't 3 minutes and 50 seconds, it was 3 minutes 40 seconds. Or we might want to delete the track. So those are typical representations. There's verbs in our RESTful app for HTML, so what we're going to be using on the web, that relate to these. So these aren't the ones we're using, but there are names, these verbs in this request that are related to create and the rest. So for create, we're going to use something called post. For read, we're going to use something called get. For update, you can use post or put. And for delete, that's the one that matches, will be delete. So that's what we'll be using. So let me give you an example of that using a program called Postman. That's what we're going to be using a little bit later. And I have a simple server up and running, and let me just do that one. Localhost, I think it's 8080. I should have checked. So I'm going to localhost 8080 API. And let me hope that this one's right. And I'm going to send a GET request. So GET, let me move a little here. The GET request reads information. So hopefully this will read and return something. So this is an app that will tell us about different workshops and who's enrolled in it in these workshops. So here I have different workshops that are being offered. It just returns a little list. And you can see that this list is in that JSON format. And now I can still do a get if I say who's in workshop React Fundamentals. So I get attendees of people who are enrolled in that React fundamentals. Let's say I want to add a new person. So adding a new person, creating one is in this post category. Let me move these around so we can see them here. So post, I should have one I've already made here. Let me look. Here's a post to that server. And the body is that I have an attendee, Emily Blunt, and the workshop she's enrolling in is called React Fundamentals. Now, I'm not sure if I've already added her or not, but so here it is. They've added her, hopefully, and she's in this React Fundamentals. Let's see if that's true by doing this get here, who's in React Fundamentals. And now we hopefully will see Emily Blunt is in. It's been added to an attendee. So I can do a delete. I have a couple of those here. My delete. So I've been changing the verbs. Here are my verb options. So now this time it's a delete. In the body, I'm trying to delete Emily Blunt React Fundamentals. So let me send that. So I'm sending a delete. The verb is delete. Here's my URI. And the information I'm sending is this attendee's Emily Blunt, the workshop's React Fundamentals. And then I say deleted. It's just returning that it was successful. And let me go ahead and get all the people who are in that. So it's a get request. There's my URI. I'll send that. And hopefully she's not there. So I haven't implemented an update, but that gives you an idea of the relationship between this CRUD, something you'll hear about. When people give you a job interview, they may ask, what's CRUD? That's create, read, update, delete. And they're related to these verbs like get, post, and so on. So the one final thing in this very short video I want to mention is that these REST architectures, or a lot of people call them RESTful architectures, there's no really official standard to these. There's just kind of a set of recommendations. So often people are more happy with using RESTful because it's sort of like REST, but not exactly. So we have some leeway here, but that's the basic idea, that we're communicating with some representation. XML is a possibility. JSON is more popular these days. So JSON, so something that both client and server can recognize and interpret. We're communicating by these messages. These messages include a verb of what we want to do, and these verbs are sort of related to this CRUD architecture or another design principle. And there's often these CRUD and RESTful apps are stateless. So that's it. It's a very short video. I just wanted to kind of give you the basics of this. And that's it. And from now on, we're talking about coding, and we're going to be looking at how to code this stuff.